Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Miss Texas Show with your co-host, Melissa Santana. Not only am I excited to bring you another edition of the show, but another wonderful guest. And so today's guest, it goes by the name of Joe. I do believe it's Potosi, but we'll make sure. But his Joe is not only a Navy veteran, husband, father, television and radio host, a speaker, also has a podcast, then an author at that. So has done a tremendous amount of things, has wonderful accomplishments, wonderful experiences. And so we are going to get the pleasure of learning more from Joe, about Joe, and all these great things. So I am excited and I hope you are too.
The Ms. Texas Show is a voice of hope for victims, survivors, advocates, and community leaders against gender-based violence to share their stories and resources. We began showcasing life in Texas. Today, we are impacting lives not only in Texas, but also around the world. Under our segment Military Time, we run this segment in partnership with the National Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We invite military and veterans who have overcome traumatic events to share their experiences during and after their military service. Under our beauty segment, we invite fellow pageant winners and contestants, artists, musicians, actors, models, and dancers. And last but not least, our survivor leaders from family violence, sex trafficking, sexual assault, stalking, and other traumatic events, who are ambassadors for these causes to share their lives and the impact they have made. To become a guest on our show, email us at msusatexas@gmail.com. If you would like to support victims and survivors of gender-based violence, make a tax-deductible donation to Hope Fix Global at www.hopeyxglobal.org.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Miss Texas Show. It's your co-host, Melissa Santana. And not only am I excited as always to bring you another edition of the show, but also another wonderful guest. And so today's guest is Joe Potosi. And so not only, and as you might have mentioned or heard of a little snippet of, but I want to elaborate on, but Joe is a person who has many great gifts. It has they participated in a lot of different activities because Joe is not only a Navy veteran, but also husband, father of 2 sons, was a television and radio host for 12 years, no small feats, is the author of the award-winning book, When the Dust Settled, is also a motivational speaker and podcast host, is also a pastor and has volunteered as a chaplain at the county jail, the Manor Care Rehab Services, and basketball coach at the YMCA for the last 23 years, and is all about helping people in his community, especially the younger generation. But he's also a team member on Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. And so he also has a website that I'm hoping he will share with us here as we continue to get to know more about him. But so Joe, with all that, I thank you so much for even taking the time to be with us here today and get to learn more about you. But so with that, I would love for viewers to know, who are you? You know, just a little bit about your journey, what led you here today, and just more about you.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for this opportunity. Absolutely. I appreciate you. And thank you for the wonderful introduction. It was beautiful. So the reason I'm here today is I began to write a journal about what I experienced as a child, and that was 15 years of physical, emotional, psychological abuse. And I started the journal because I heard people say it helps you get through situations. And that was the case for me. So the journal was just get my feelings down on paper, pen to paper, and I would share the stories of my past with my wife. And she encouraged me to write a book that can help so many people. So that was my motivation. The idea is to let people know they're not alone, they have a value, they have significance. And above all else, Melissa, your condition does not have to be your conclusion. Whatever it is you're facing in life, encourage people to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and move on. You have a purpose, and the value in this life. And in fact, your value is unmeasurable. And in spite of what you've been told as a kid coming up, or in spite of some of the hardships you face in adult life, I just want to encourage you to never give up, never quit, and keep on keeping on. That's essentially my message to each and every one. Over the last few years, I've had the privilege and honor of speaking in community centers, schools, churches, coffee shops, because it's my way. It's an extension of, you mentioned the fact that I'm in the ministry. This book has become an extension of that. It's all about helping people. And it takes courage and it takes a lot of transparency to, open up. But the reason I do it is by sharing what I have to say, someone can relate and they could be inspired, be encouraged to just keep going.
Absolutely.
Now, yes. Listen, Melissa, everybody has a story.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, many of us have bad stories or bad experiences that we've been through or are presently going through. So in no way am I saying that, I experienced the worst things ever. They were indeed bad, but what I do want to convey is there was a breakthrough in my life, and that is I found the ability to forgive my tormentors. And once I was able to do that, it set me free in a way I never imagined. And that's huge, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes. And so I am a father and of two sons, and I've broken that cycle. I've broken that cycle of homelessness, of abandonment, of physical and emotional abuse. My kids don't know what it's like being locked in a room and always afraid every time I'm in their presence, they're going to get beat for no apparent reason. So I'm living proof of that although I've been through those experiences and there was some baggage for some time, I got through it. And so can you.
Absolutely. And actually that's the inspiring part, not only like you said about your story and what you've written and just your contributions and how you share it with your children. I'm actually curious about that. So like what was like, as much as you're willing to share, by the way, but just, what was life like for you, though, the person before you became a parent, before you became an author, like growing up, and just, what kind of thoughts did you have back then? And just like, what was life like for you when you were a child?
Okay. So I remember, it's an amazing thing, Melissa, because how the brain works. If you were to ask me, Melissa, what were you doing last year, July 4th, or, just pick a random date, I'd have to think long and hard because I don't remember all the details. But if you ask me what happened when I was 6 or 7 or what happened when I was in 3rd grade, it's vivid in my mind, right? So I'll just share a little bit. I was around 3.5 when my biological father left the family. At that time, I had a sister, a little bit older than myself, like 13 months, and a brand new baby brother. We lived in the projects. We're pretty poor. And the same day he left, this other man came into the house the same day through the back door. Now, race should never be an issue in any situation, but back in the 1970s, my mother being a white woman started to, my eventual stepfather was a Black man. It was frowned upon by my extended family, right? My aunts and uncles, some of my cousins. They didn't approve of the relationship, and there was always these idle threats. They're going to kill him just based on the color of his skin, and so on and so forth. I think everyone understands that that was a real issue in our country, and it still is to a certain extent with all different ethnic groups in the world, in fact. Anyway, so what I remember before my dad left was he was a very doting, loving individual. My mom was very loving and caring and nurturing. But once the stepdad stepped onto the scene, everything changed. They both like to drink alcohol in excess, smoke weed, do other drugs. And me and my sister found ourselves over the following years, in fact, being the parents to our kid brothers, right? Changing the diapers, feeding the babies, just watching out for my siblings. And my stepfather and mother, their form of discipline. Well, let me back up and say, my stepdad became extremely physically abusive toward my mother and toward myself and somewhat toward my sister. And he wouldn't just spank me with the belt. He would use like a wooden board or his a cord from an iron, and he would just beat me for no reason. But I witnessed him break my mother's collarbone and broke her jaw, ripped her face open. And I would always try to comfort her and just let her know I love her. But everything became my fault. It was my fault she was beaten. It was my fault there was no food. It was my fault that, things were as bad as they were because I looked like my father. I acted like my father, my birth father. And I would ask, when is my dad coming home? Because I'm a little kid. I didn't understand. And it got so bad that, when I was in third grade, my stepfather didn't work. My mom worked from time to time. I got my first job sweeping a parking lot at a local restaurant every Saturday, spring, summer, fall, for $2. And the owner of the shop says, "Kid, that's not your issue. You shouldn't have to worry about providing for your family." I'm like, "Oh, it is my problem because everything is my fault. They can't pay bills. My dad doesn't give them money. My stepdad doesn't work. I need to provide for my family." So I was always trying to make a difference, trying to help out. And you see, when my mother established this new relationship, the love she showed toward me and her affection, it all went away. In fact, she put my stepdad ahead of us. And she became a very toxic individual. And something that's not really talked about back in those days was mental health. My mother, stepfather, and father all had mental illness that was never addressed. And so it was a very, very difficult time. But me and my sister's main role was to protect our brothers. Like whenever my mom and stepdad would get into an altercation, we would take the kids and run downstairs and hide underneath the stairwell so that my kid brothers wouldn't see it, but they could still hear it. And obviously, at the time, I didn't know it was PTSD, but I believe we all suffered from that over the years, watching the violence. So I thought I still had to ally my mom for a time until she was upset with me about I was struggling in school. And I was struggling in school because now, Melissa, you know about the schoolyard bullies, the neighborhood bullies. Well, school was my safe place. I loved going to school because I wouldn't be locked in the room. I wouldn't be physically assaulted. None of those issues. But after a time, I started to struggle in school because my mind was always racing about having to go home. A lot of the kids drug their feet going to school. I would typically run to school because that was my happy place. I was the kid that always took his time getting home because the bully on the block was in those four walls. He was the one that I had to live with, walk on eggshells around. And I was really afraid for all of our lives. Now in the projects, there was a whole melting pot of people. There was Asian people, Hispanic people, Black people, some white people, but I was the minority in my neighborhood. me, my sister, and my two brothers, but we never looked at it that way. We were all kids that we treated each other the way we like to be treated, not based on the color of your skin, but on the content of the character. And that's why I can never figure out why every time, give you a little background. This is in Rockford, Illinois, not far from Chicago. My mom and birth father are from Dubuque, Iowa. Usually in the summers, we got to go to Dubuque, Iowa, to see my grandparents and my cousins, aunts and uncles. And it usually never failed. My father would show up. And, you know, this guy was my hero. I always envisioned him being like Superman. He would show up out of nowhere, beat up the bad guy, and reunite the family. But that never happened. But when we'd go there, it never failed. At a point in time, my grandmother and my dad and maybe my grandpa would sit around and ask me how things were going. And I would tell them how my stepdad would beat me like a football, you know, throw me around the house, and just how he'd beat my mother and lock us in the basement for hours upon hours and leave. He would leave the house, and we had no way of getting us out of the basement if there was ever a fire or any such thing. And instead of them calling social services, instead of them calling the police, they would just call him all kind of names, you know, derogatory names, and call him and threaten to kill him and just cuss out my mom. But guess what? I was put back on the bus, sent back into the trenches, and I learned a valuable lesson. You don't put your business out on the streets, right? But essentially what I'm trying to get across is my family failed me. When I was struggling in school and I cried out to my teacher and I told her what was happening, they failed me. There was a time after school, me and my sister got to go to an after school program at a local church twice a week. And I would ask my mom if I can stay and help clean up, if I could just go. And she's like, yeah, stay out of my hair or whatever. And while at this group twice a week, I heard the stories about God. I heard about this guy named Jesus and what he did for all of mankind. And I wanted to believe, I wanted to trust, but I couldn't believe or trust in the people I live with, the people I see, feel, and touch. How can I believe in a God I cannot see, right? But still, all in all, church was an outlet for me. I got out of the house. I usually try to have my brothers. We used to go to church on Sundays and sometimes Wednesday nights. I would include my brothers to get them out of the house, you know. But eventually the church failed us. When we confided in them what was happening, nothing was done. So I felt all alone. And my stepdad, he promised to get us out of the projects. He promised. I'm like, I had to grow up so fast. Just being a little kid in fourth grade by this time, I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. I know better than that. But we get out of the projects. Ironically, we moved right behind another set of projects. It was a house, but a house isn't a home, Melissa, because the abuse continued. All the boys' bedrooms were in the basement, right? We had a toilet, we had a black and white TV. My one brother said back then it was super cool, a sunk-in floor for like a waterbed, although we never had a waterbed. And we get home from school, he would send us to the basement, like keep us locked down there until it was time for dinner, let us up, eat dinner, take a bath, go back downstairs where we were locked like animals. But as I said, he would usually just leave at night. My mom was at work and we'll be trapped down there. Anyway, I soon got a job as a paper boy. I was giving money to my mom to help with bills because I was trying to buy her acceptance. And I was thinking by giving you money, you'll like me again, maybe even love me. And maybe my stepdad will stay off my back. But the abuse toward my mother and the way he treated me, the way when he would discipline me, he would have all the kids gather around. He'd have me stripped naked. And on the basement stairs, he'd have me bent over like slightly and he'd be walking back and forth behind me, and he'd be rehashing in his mind what I did wrong, and then he would just start to beat the crap out of me. He'd grab me by the arm and just wail on me, and that was my life. After some time, with the paper route job, I got snow shoveling jobs. I made a ton of money. I thought it was a lot of money as a fifth grader, and I gave a lot to my mother, but I kept some. I decided to quit the paper route because I got tired of the way he was treating me and the way he was treating my mom. So long story short, it was on a Saturday night. He called me upstairs. He was sitting at the kitchen table, cleaning his beloved 38 caliber handgun. Newspapers all over the table. He was cleaning it out, and I sat there shaking like a leaf because I knew I was in trouble again for something. And he asked me why I quit my job, and I said, I didn't have an answer. I was kind of staring at the ground, and I can hear him putting the bullets back in the gun. And he says, give me one reason why I should pull the trigger. And he wore dark glasses, like dark. He had issues with his eyes, I guess. He always wore shades. And I looked up at him, and I could see two little dots, his eyes. And I quickly looked down again. Then I heard the trigger. He pulled the gun at me, and he pulled the trigger. Now, I didn't know this at the time. It was Russian roulette. But I guess I was so scared, I peed my pants in fear, ran downstairs, and I hid behind the furnace where he couldn't get me. This was an occurrence all the time with my stepdad. He was always doing things like this to me. And by this point in my life, I was done. I was fed up. I decided I'm going to take my own life. So I'd walk to school, and I'd walk along the real busy street and think I can step in front of that garbage truck or that dump truck. Ooh, what about a school bus? That's all I was obsessed with for about a month. That's all I kept thinking about. And on one weekend, they let me sleep in, God knows why. And nobody was home. And I said, this is my chance to go find that gun. I went to their bedroom, and I couldn't find it anywhere. He had a 12-gauge shotgun. I found that, but there was no bullets in it, or no shells. So I kept looking more for that gun, and I hear them pull up the driveway. So I quickly ran downstairs, and that's when the light came on. And I believe it was God telling me, you need to be there for your sister and for your brothers. So what happened then was the abuse continued. In fact, it got so bad. I did something he didn't like, and he threw me and my brother. He took us down to the county juvenile, and they locked us up so we can see what it's like when you make my stepdad mad, because he has all these connections. And moving forward, no matter what he would do to me, my motivation was my kid brothers and my sister. They could not kill my spirit, Melissa. That's why the name of the book, When the Dust Settled. If you look at the cover, I'm still standing. The calamity all around me. When things kind of settle down, I'm still standing. They could not kill my spirit. And I mentioned that whole part about the suicide because that's an epidemic in our country. And since that time I was a kid, I've never had those ideations. I want to tell people that if you are feeling that kind of way, seek professional help. Go to the ER. Let them know what's going on. But I want to tell you, I don't know you, but you have such an important important role in this life, man. You are important and you're loved. I love you. And I want to see you do well in life. Nothing is so bad you have to take your own life. because, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna echo the same. It's just that I wasn't well, and thank you so much for even sharing and all of these things. But that's what I was thinking a lot about. What you said, there was many moving parts about that, even just that piece of your story, because of course there's so much of it, right, and it's still unfolding. But just having heard that part, not only that, like I just love that you brought it to that, and obviously you no longer feel that way, and you help others to not feel that way either if they're also considering, because like you said, it's definitely not this, like, I mean, I get that it might still be a taboo conversation for some and they're not talking about it, but is it happening? Absolutely. And should we be having more conversations about it? But definitely, as you were saying that, I also remember specifically when you said that eventually it became that all the abuse that was happening, all the traumatic things were your fault. So that was another time that I felt like that was another lie that needed to be dispelled, and another myth that needed to be debunked here, was that I'm sure, or at least, I'm hoping that you no longer feel that way and that you don't still internalize that. But like you just said, I also want to echo, if there's any part of you that still feels that way, it absolutely was not your fault. And I think it's so unfortunate that they were trying to make it seem like it's your fault. And also that as a kid, that's exactly what you're gonna think, is that, well, then obviously I must have something to do with it. I'm a bad person. These bad things are because of me. And so I'm just, I'm glad that that's no longer your reality, but it's just so unfortunate that at one point in time it was, and that the people who are supposed to be taking care of you and providing safety and security were allowing you to think you had did something wrong.
Right. And, it is kind of a taboo thing,
Yep.
I'm a moderator on that show, Moments of Clarity with Tiffany, and we're trying to break the stigma on mental health. Men who deal with anxiety, depression, they are too proud to go see a doctor or a therapist, right? But there's no shame in that. There is no shame. Get that help, man. And listen, that also means we need to be the sounding board. Maybe you have a coworker or a neighbor or a friend who's going through something in life, and maybe you can't relate to that issue, but you can be a source of support, right? You can be that person that they can lean on, and you can say, I'm here for you. Can I bring you a meal, or can I bring you meals throughout the week? Can I babysit? Whatever the situation is, I think we all have an opportunity to make a difference, given whatever situation we're in. The problem arises, I believe, is when in today's society, people just look the other way. Like in the neighborhood I live in, when we first moved in this neighborhood, there was a lot of kids, and the kids played with each other or whatnot. And the neighbors would talk, and we would have block parties or whatever. Not so much anymore. Everyone keeps to themselves. And when there's a medical crisis or some things happen, it's like people, something happens to somebody's kid, it's like the rallying around each other isn't like it should be, or like it used to be. I don't know if you can relate to that. And it's unfortunate. It's just like, listen, you hear all the time about all these kids shooting other kids or doing all this stuff that's really, really unfortunate. And I've heard people say, those badass kids ain't my kids. That ain't my problem. But it is our problem. This is our future. And that's why I volunteered for a very long time in my life, not because it's an obligation or it's a duty, it's because I want to make a difference, especially with children, to let them know that, they have a bright future, and give them that positive male role model that they don't have. I never had. Well, I shouldn't say that. I had an uncle that stepped in when I come to Dubuque, and he was more like when he was around, like a father, but very limited, right? I think we all can make a difference. And I'm sure you heard this one, listen, there's nobody like your mama, right? There's nobody like your mama. And eventually my mother left my stepdad. We were living in a battered woman's shelter. And eventually we have gotten an apartment. Now you think, in my mind, I thought, hey, maybe my dad will come back around now. because maybe he was afraid of my stepdad, and maybe, whatever, he'll come around. It didn't happen. But the living situation with my mother got so bad. She was so physically abusive, so verbally abusive, emotionally abusive. It came a point in time, I asked my stepdad, remember, he's the bully, he's the monster, if I can live with him. That's how bad things got. And he just laughed in my face and walked away. And so, I just never gave up. I just invested in my kid brothers' lives. So when I was in high school, I volunteered at a community center as a baseball coach. I was assistant first base coach, 8, 9-year-olds. And a lot of these kids, their brothers went to school with me. By this time I'm in high school, and their brothers are gang banging, selling drugs, just up to no good. And these kids all had no real male role models. So that's why me and the other coaches wanted to make a difference. And they won the championship that year. They got a free trip to Chicago to see the White Sox. It was awesome. And so I just like to invest in people's lives, all people, And the thing, Melissa, is the message I conveyed to my own kids. Through the years, I've shared with them what I went through and how wrong it was, and how, I ain't the best, I ain't the perfect father by far, but I do my very best. But they know they're loved. And you might think this is corny, but it means a lot to me. I can be in public somewhere and my kids, we'll meet for dinner or we'll go to a movie. They'll come up to me and they give me a hug. They're like, I need a hug, Dada. They call me Dada. And they just know that, that they're loved and that I'll never do anything to hurt them. And I just hope that goes on to the next generation, that for their children, that the cycle's been broken, that you can break the cycle. You can break the cycle of abuse, of neglect, even of addictions. Those cycles can be broken. And I know with 100% assurance that God is the source of my strength. He's the source of where I'm at today.
Well, definitely. And that's actually something I was going to say as well, is that I love too, that, again, not only are you helping to transform that way of thinking and help people realize how much they are needed, that they do have purpose, and that, we shouldn't believe those lies that make us think that we shouldn't be here and that we shouldn't be, that we don't deserve to have a life, and that the best thing is that we should end our life. I definitely think that that's like the worst, one of the worst places you can end up, but I can see why, a lot of people do, and, get there. I just, want to see them not stay there. But with you, I think that was like incredible. And one of the most fascinating parts also about your story, apart from what I had shared earlier, is that you had gotten to this point, for a month, like you said, had been battling with that thought and, exploring the ideas. You had gotten to the point where you were even, considering different options of how you were going to end your life. So you were very much committed to that thought and that you were going to complete it. However, you got that voice from God. So speaking of God, I thought that was, like for different people, there's different things, right? That help them, that save them, that help them heal. But you hearing that voice, I just think was incredible, and I just think I'm glad it helped you to remind you, no, actually, you should not leave this earth. You still have work to do, but also, and you're needed. But I think that, for others too, I just want them to know that, I don't know if they might be getting it from a divine power, if hopefully they might get that voice from someone else that's trying to help them. But whichever, we just want to make sure that you have that kind of voice that you listen to instead of the one that is making you think you do not have value. So I just think it's incredible that you had it. And I'm assuming that it is God, but I still want to ask the question, is that, what was your saving grace? Was there other things that you used on your path, after you started healing and doing those things? What were the things that worked for you on that journey?
As a child, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, definitely as a child, and then, things that you might use now too as an adult.
Okay, I'm sorry. So as a child, as I mentioned before, church became a big part of my life. And when I got older, like in high school, my stepdad would send us to his childhood church, Pentecostal church that was different than the previous churches we went to. However, we would have church on Sunday mornings that would last till like 12 or 1, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights. I was always going to church because I was getting out of the house, and I would typically bring my brothers along. And there was a gospel band called Psalms 100. If you ever Google it, they're out of Rockville, Illinois. In fact, they wrote the theme song for Jesse Jackson back in '84, Run Jesse Run. Anyway, I became a roadie, and we would go on road trips to like Southern Illinois. We went to Detroit, went to Chicago, went all over. And they would, play this gospel music. And it was a huge outlet for me. And during this whole time, I was trying to figure out who God was. I remember I'd be at church, I had a spiral notebook. And every time the preacher would say a verse, I would write it down and I would memorize it. And with the intention of applying it to my life. But no one really explained things to me, how things, the context. There's always a pre-context. You don't just read 1, 2, 3 sentences out of a chapter of a book and you think you know the book, right? You have to know the context. And I was just so hungry, Melissa. I was searching so hard and so much for, I don't know, like some type of inner peace, some type of relief too, during this time of my life. So fast forward, I went to the Navy. I graduated from high school early, and I went to the Navy. And while in the Navy, I swore I wouldn't be like my mom, my dad, my stepdad, alcoholics, that I would be not the typical sailor. My grandfather was my inspiration for going in the Navy versus the Army. He was in Pearl Harbor. He would always lecture me about not, don't fight, don't drink, don't meet up with all these strange women, all these things that is notorious for military life, specifically the Navy. Not everyone, but it's just like a stereotype. Well, I went to the Navy, and by this time I had found forgiveness from my birth father, and I released him from, I was resentful. I was upset that he had left and never really was a part of our lives. And, but I had gotten closure with him. And because I love my mother, I thought I loved her too. I'm sorry. Because I love my mother, I thought I forgave her by default. No, it don't work that way. And I carried around all this baggage throughout my naval career. And I got into a lot of fist fights, drop of a hat. I began to self-medicate alcohol to take away the pain. Because although I was away from my mom and my stepdad, there was still written space in my mind for free. Does that make sense? And so I got out of the Navy with an honorable discharge, but the cycle continued. And to the point that I became homeless. I did it to myself. And I moved to Iowa. That's where I met my wife. So we got married in 96. Easter of 97, I went to church for like the millionth time, and I heard the Easter message about Jesus Christ and what he did for us on the cross. And it was then I truly believed and I truly trusted. And I became a born-again believer. And immediately I got involved with ministry. I created a clown ministry for kids. And by the way, before I got saved, I put myself in outpatient treatment for the alcoholism. And anyway, I got into the ministry. I created a clown ministry for kids. The nursing home ministry I started up. That lasted 14. And then the halfway house to jail and TV and radio, all with the intention of trying to help people. And just before my son was born, now this has been key in my life, Melissa. I'm a man of few words, by the way. So I knew I was going to be a father for the first time. And all these memories, all these things resurfaced in my dreams, all these nightmares of what I endured as a kid, the abuse I suffered. If I tell you, Melissa, if you had a child and you tell your child you ain't nothing, you're never going to be nothing, you're a piece of garbage, just like your dad, eventually you're going to believe that. And you're going to take that into adulthood. So I dealt with that for a time too, but I got over that relatively quickly. Anyway, God kept telling me, not an audible voice, but in my heart, in my mind, I have forgiven you. Who are you not to forgive? So one specific day, I never forget this. I was laying in bed, and I made a conscious choice to forgive my mother and my stepfather. And it took 1,000,000 pounds off my chest. It set me free. It set me free. And going forward from there, I just continue to try to be a positive influence in my community, to be the best father I can, to never have my kids be in this environment or a situation I was in. And just trying to make a difference in the world in which I live. And my relationship with God through Jesus Christ is the driving force behind it. And that's my motivation and my desire to keep doing that. Now, I've had my struggles. I'm far from being a perfect husband or a perfect father. None of us are perfect, but I am who I am, right? And I continue to strive to be all I can be.
Absolutely. And I think, and congrats though, on being able to have like a marriage, that you're still in. Not everybody can say that. And that, you found a partner nonetheless that, to spend your life with, and that you do have children, which is a blessing. I mean, it definitely is its own blessing. Like you mentioned, I mean, they just shower you with love. It's this unconditional love that, you can't find anywhere else. They look to you for the guidance that, and unfortunately, even though you weren't able to get the best upbringing in that way from your parents, I mean, you're definitely providing that for your own children, and I'm glad that, like you said, that it did start though with, you breaking that chain that you had, against you, and, getting that freedom that was on the other side that you had to like work towards, to be honest. Cause yeah, agreed. I do agree with you that, yep, it is absolutely growing up with those lies. It is absolutely hearing those messages. And even though they're not true, you absolutely believe them, you give them power, and then unfortunately they can take over your life. But I'm just so glad to hear that that's not your reality now. And like you said, even though it might not be far from perfect, same for mine, it's, you're still working and operating in such a positive light that I feel like, it's no mistake, or anything that, like, as a result, you now have these other blessings that you're able to enjoy. But I also, because of that, I actually want to give you space too to talk about that. Cause, I know you talked about the other work you do and all that, but even just as a father, like what has been the biggest lesson, as a parent, and like, given from everything that you went through, and like, what's the biggest lesson you've had, or what is the biggest takeaway? What's the best memory you've had with them? Like, what would you say when it comes to that?
Okay. That's a lot. I want to say first though, I believe God brought my wife into my life.
Oh, absolutely.
And I believe without her, I wouldn't be the man I am today. It's the best thing that ever happened to me, really. So bringing up my kids, I'll give you one example, Melissa. Maybe this answers a part of that. When I got time to discipline my children with the belt, I had to really work through that process. Okay. I'm not going to get into all the details behind it, but what I will say is, I'll never forget the first time I had to give them a spanking. I made sure I explained to them what they did that was wrong. Then I let them just settle down, whatever. And I always made sure I was not angry when I dished out the discipline. I didn't want to take out my frustration out on them in a way that's counterproductive. And once I would give them a swat or two on the butt, I would let them settle down, and then I'd go back in and love on them and tell them that, you know, just again, how much I love them and how we're going to get through this, and that, you know, you don't need to be concerned about that. So I don't know, I think discipline your kids is huge. Because if there's no discipline in place when they grow into men or women, they'll have no respect for authorities or for their elders or for the rule of law. I'm convinced of that. And the word of God speaks on that. And through the years, some of my favorite memories, I got to coach football here in Dubuque, Iowa. And I'm a huge Chicago Bears fan, right? So the leagues they had established didn't have a Chicago Bears football team. And we kind of got late to the party. The only team that was still needing players was the Packers. So we signed the kids up and they got to play for the Packers. And we did that for 3 or 4 years. It was so much fun. And the one thing I taught the kids, all the kids, is that when they, you know, when not do such a good job, instead of berating them and getting on them and just hollering and screaming, there was a much better constructive way to do it. And just tell them, you know, just try a little bit harder, try it this way, try it that way, give them a, you know, arm around the shoulder and just around the neck and tell them that, good try, but let's do better. Anyway, throughout that whole time, I would try to implement life lessons in football. And at the time, a lot of kids probably didn't understand, right? You know, well, the main thing you understood was hard work pays off. You know, if you want to be good, you have to work hard. And you need to be honest, and you need to be reliable, and you need to be respectful. All these principles that we try to live by today. And, you know, that was just my MO. I always had something in the back of my mind. There's always a bigger picture with me. And so the amazing thing was, now this was probably about 2 years ago, I saw 3 of these kids, you know, obviously they're all grown up now, or, you know, high school age. And each one of them in their own way, I met different places. They were like, thank you for being our coach. You know, we had so much fun. We never won any games, but we still had fun. But they said, each of them said, thank you for teaching me about life. Thank you for being there to talk to me. Thank you for listening to my issues. It still almost brings tears to my eyes today, because that's what we need in the world. We need to be a difference maker. And I don't go around, ooh, look what I did. No, I don't do that. Little is great if God is in it. I just try to make a difference in the kids' life by teaching them the principles of football. Oh, and by the way, how life works, right? And it was a message to me that there were kids listening, and that maybe I did make a difference. And these young men are going to go out to the world and they're going to be a change maker themselves.
I definitely agree. And I think that was such a beautiful way of capturing that, like that incredible influence that you can have on others. And then what's incredible is the incredible influence they left on you, you know, and so like the impact was definitely reciprocated, like that has now stayed with you and all of that. And I'm glad that you doubled back and actually made a shout out to your wife, because agreed, she absolutely deserves her accolades as well for being the incredible partner she is. And that is another one I want to touch on. Given all of that, I mean, I think that is the best impact we can leave, you know, is how we treat others, how we can help others, how we can uplift others. It's wonderful to hear that you are in a marriage that, you know, so not only are you doing great work, but you happen to be married to someone else who you also appreciate, who appreciates you. I am definitely curious what advice you have for everybody at every stage. So like anybody that might be in a marriage, people that's still looking for their significant other, what advice would you give to anyone?
Okay, good. I think the first thing and one of the most important things is communication, right? If you communicate by smoke signals, I'm not gonna see that memo, right? So I think if you are in a marriage or you're possibly engaged to be married, I think communication is huge and everything else follows. For those people who are on the verge of becoming married, now this is the pastor part of me speaking, it's crucial that you get everything out on the table. What I mean is, now this might sound silly, but any of your financial issues, like maybe you had to file bankruptcy in the past and your significant other doesn't know about that. All those types of things need to be put out on the table so there's no surprises once you are married. Because once you marry that individual, your terrible credit becomes her terrible credit, in a sense. And I've done a lot of marital counseling, and one of the big issues is past relationships, that they still keep in touch with this individual through Facebook or whatever. And that's a big red flag because your focus should be on your soon to be husband or soon to be wife. And just being transparent, I'll put it to you this way. Whether you're married now or prepare to be married, or you're going through a rough patch, I'm going to give you some free advice. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. I'm going to say that again. Quick to listen. Now, Melissa, I know you hear me, but are you listening? There's a difference, right? Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Believe me, it works. And you can use that principle in every aspect of your life, work, family, whatever. And I think that if, and that was like one of the things we do when I get home from work, my wife gets home from work, we sit around and we communicate. So what's going on? How was your work day? And we take turns making dinner. Actually, I'm not that good of a cook, but it's again, it just goes back to communication and just being honest, man. Listen, there was times when I would beat myself up about, okay, I tried to fix a plumbing job and I had to go to the hardware store like 5 times and it was still not right. And I was just kind of upset with myself, beat myself up mentally. I never forget what my wife said. She said, you can never be, she says, I can never be as hard on you as you are on yourself. You need to learn to let go of it and start over. And I use that principle today in a lot of different contexts. If we have an argument, never go to bed angry. Try to get it resolved. Try to get it worked out, because you can wake up in the morning angry, right? If you just, don't resolve the conflict. And sometimes it's not always fun and games. And what I mean by that is sometimes, there could be tears and high emotions, but it needs to be addressed and it needs to be worked through. Hope that helps.
Oh, it absolutely does. And I definitely feel like, yeah, those are definitely words to live by. And not only there, but like you said, in just different relationships in general, like not even just the romantic ones, how we can do that, and applying those principles can definitely help us when we are trying to communicate. And I definitely think that's why a lot of miscommunication happens, because we're not doing those things that you mentioned. So I definitely feel like it can help us so much. So with all of that, I feel like I've learned a lot about you as, the author, a little bit as a father, as a husband. I mean, there's so much. I'm curious, if you want to share with us, are there any things like what's coming up for you? Like what other things are you going to be working on in the future? What's in the books, or like what's in store for, Joe in the future?
Okay. Sure. You asked before about my website too. Before I forget, I'd like to share my website. So you guys can find my website, Joe Potosi, Potosi.com. And on that website, you can find most of the links for my books, for my book rather, some of the podcasts and some other information. Love to have you on there. You can also find me on Facebook, Joe Potosi, Instagram, Joe_Potosi. And right now I'm working on my second book. And I have a book signing coming up next week at River Lights Bookstore. I recently had 2 book signings at BAM, Books a Million. And my book is there too, by the way, bam.com, walmart.com. I went to my hometown about a month ago. We had a book signing at Barnes & Noble. And July, at the end of July and in August, I have 2 events in Wisconsin, speaking events. I'm always looking to do more. I'm always open to come and speak to the different groups, and just kind of share my experiences and my hope and dreams for everyone else, because I just want to inspire people. Listen, we are living in such a difficult time right now in the world. And it's so easy to get, to get derailed by everything. And I just want to let people know that, and I know I alluded to this before, but just hang on, okay? Things are going to get better. I don't know you, I can't speak to you, but for me, it's my relationship with God through Jesus Christ. And if you're struggling with real issues, I just encourage you to seek professional help, because guess what? It's out there abundantly everywhere. You were asking another question. Oh, so the second book is called Unshackled. And it shares more about present day life. It's kind of like a part 2. I think it's important to tell the rest of the story, because I want people to see that you can come back, that you can. I shared before that when I went to the Navy, I did exactly what I said I wasn't going to do. I became an alcoholic. And I'm not proud of that, Melissa, but by God's grace and mercy, he brought me through, right? And it's like, let me ask you a question. If you knew we can get a free meal, let's say that you haven't ate in a week, I don't know, and you get a free meal, great food, good hospitality, and it's free, wouldn't you want to tell other people?
Absolutely.
When someone is struggling in life and someone is having real problems, wouldn't you want to help those people?
Absolutely.
And that's where I'm at. And the amazing thing, Melissa, is this. When I was a kid, I wouldn't say introvert is the right word, but I didn't really like people because of what I was going through. I couldn't trust the people that are supposed to be taking care of me. How can I trust this one and that one? And trust that not trusting folks went into my adult life too. Because of just what I endured. And, it's just, I want to help people, bottom line. That's all there is to it. And I think that when I help people, it helps me, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Because
you reinforce them where I was and where I'm at today. And, I just think about all these kids. So I have an event coming up with Kiwanis. Kiwanis, I don't know if you've heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a member in Kiwanis, and we have all these plans. And since I've been on board, I have these ideas they like. But the biggest problem we're having is we don't have enough volunteers necessarily. And the reason I bring up that point is, for you out there listening, if you can volunteer an hour a month, or maybe a half hour a month at the boys club, the girls club, Kiwanis, coaching baseball or basketball, football, whatever is your niche, whatever you be a big brother, be a big sister. I'm asking you, I'm begging you to please consider that, because the young kids of today, they need that in their lives.
Absolutely. Yes, they do. And I definitely think that, like you said, I also don't know if people realize that that little bit of time can make a big impact, and help a person.
Absolutely.
Right. So like, it definitely doesn't have to be this large contribution, but you'll definitely be helping a great amount of people in the process. So I feel like I'm glad you lifted that up, because yes, I definitely think it's something that, we all can do. And it's just more ways that we can definitely spread that, the thing that you believe so well, which is to help others and feel good in the process. Cause I agree, when I help others, I definitely feel great also. So yes.
Absolutely.
So Joe, I mean, it was literally a pleasure. It was an honor, but also I'm glad you shared, those future projects. I know you got the book signing, y'all heard it here. Volunteering, y'all heard that. But the website, one more time, if you could say that before we wrap up our time.
Yes, so it's Joe Potosi, so it's JoePotosi.com.
Awesome, awesome. So y'all heard it. So feel free to connect, feel free to link up, whatever you can, because this is definitely a great individual to connect with, work with, and learn from, because I certainly have. So thank you, Joe, and thank you everyone that tuned in.
Thank you, everybody.